Okay, let's unpack this. You know how sometimes a political movement or party rises to prominence, and the surface-level headlines just don't capture the full story?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at the recent House of Councilors election in Japan, where a party called Sanseito made a significant leap.
A big leap, yeah.
On the surface, it might seem like a straightforward right-wing populist movement, but our deep dive into the source material reveals a much more nuanced and frankly fascinating picture of their policies and appeal.
What's fascinating here is that while many media outlets focus on the, let's say, more controversial aspects of their platform, their core support often comes from surprising places.
Right.
So our mission today is to go beyond the easy criticisms and truly understand what Sanseito actually advocated, why it resonated with so many people, and how their rise might be different from previous right-wing movements in Japan.
And you've got a background in this area, right? Media and social movements.
That's right. I've spent years researching media and social movements, initially focusing on the left, actually. But I shifted to the right-wing landscape around the mid-2010s,
Okay.
especially looking at how digital media and, SNS, social media platforms shape public opinion. The Sanseito case offers a unique intersection of economic, environmental, and cultural narratives. It's quite something.
So, to kick us off, the source material points out that Sanseito's manifesto is structured around three main pillars: enriching Japanese people, protecting Japanese people, and nurturing Japanese people. But what's interesting is how the actual policies under these pillars and maybe the logic behind them often get overlooked. Let's start with enriching Japanese people, their economic policy. What exactly were they proposing, and how did they justify it?
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, their economic platform begins with seemingly straightforward promises. Things like drastically reducing the national burden rate.
From what, 46%?
Yeah, from 46% down to 35%. Big cut. Through tax cuts and social insurance premium reductions.
Okay, sounds appealing on the surface.
Right. They also aim to strengthen key Japanese industries, AI, automotive, even subculture, interestingly.
Subculture, like anime and manga.
Exactly. But the foundational logic for all this, and this is key, is deeply rooted in a super aggressive fiscal policy. And it's primarily based on modern monetary theory, or MMT.
MMT. Okay, so the first big surprise here is that a party often labeled right-wing is basing its entire economic platform on modern monetary theory. An idea that, as our sources show, has deep roots in left-wing thought. That's a fascinating ideological flip, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really is. Essentially, MMT argues that a country like Japan, which prints its own currency, the yen, can spend without the usual tax revenue limits.
Right.
Taxes, in this view, are mainly for controlling inflation, not funding spending directly.
Okay.
And Sanseito takes this concept, which, surprisingly originated on the left, with figures like Stephanie Kilton in the U.S., focusing on full employment, robust social welfare, and they make it the unshakable truth of their economic policy.
Wow. So they're really committed to it.
Oh, deeply. They explicitly advocate revising Article 4 of the Fiscal Act, which traditionally prohibits deficit bonds for general expenditure, a provision often linked historically to anti-war sentiment.
I see.
This commitment to MMT is described in our source as their strongest belief. It's gotten to the point where criticizing their fiscal policy often leads to, intense backlash from their supporters online. It's basically a left-wing idea that, in the Japanese context, sort of went right-wing as an anti-austerity movement. And it often gets intertwined with claims, that foreign workers exploit social insurance or foreign investors are buying up land, which then justifies policies against accepting them.
Okay, that's a huge economic shift they're proposing. A bold gamble, really. Promising to boost the economy by essentially printing money and cutting taxes.
Yeah.
Let's move to the second pillar. Protecting Japanese people. You've framed this as an environmental policy.
Yeah, broadly speaking.
That sounds potentially like a Green Party platform, but the source suggests it's very different. How so?
Indeed. Very different. While they advocate for things like 100% food self-sufficiency, organic farming, agricultural protection stuff that might sound traditionally green,
Right.
they fundamentally dispute global warming and decarbonization policies.
They dispute global warming.
They do. So this isn't your typical climate justice agenda. Instead, it's rooted in what we call nohonshugi, or agrarianism. It's a traditional Japanese right-wing way of thinking.
No hunchubi.
They literally look at soil, focusing on national food production, traditional farming rather than the sky, concerns about global climate change.
Got it. soil over sky.
Exactly. And this particular environmental stance also connects directly to their anti-WHO and anti-globalism positions. Those really gained prominence during the COVID-19 pandemic, didn't they?
They did, yeah. Often linked with anti-vaccine sentiments, too.
Precisely. Intertwined with anti-vaccine sentiments. So you have this unique blend here, an economic policy that gets tied up with xenophobia, and an environmental policy deeply linked to this agrarian idea, all quite distinct from conventional political categories.
And they even propose things like go-to-travel subsidies.
Yeah, specifically for seniors, framed as a way to encourage domestic tourism over inbound tourism and supposedly reduce medical costs by promoting prevention through travel. It's creative framing.
Creative is one word for it. Okay, and finally, nurturing Japanese people, their cultural policy. What does that entail, and how does it fit into their broader platform?
This pillar is, in many ways, the ideological core of Sanseito.
The core.
They advocate for ending the deviation score-based education system, the intense focus on exam rankings.
Right, and Sachi system.
Exactly. Emphasizing instead character formation through Japanese culture and history, promoting patriotism, family love. It's explicitly described as a revivalist cultural policy.
Revivalist.
Yeah, directly echoing the long-standing Nippon Kaigi movements from the 1990s onward, including their push for specific textbook narratives about history.
Okay, so they're echoes of older conservative movements there.
Strong echoes. And here's where we uncover a truly surprising disconnect. Sanseito's proposed New Japan Constitution, they call it Soken, meaning entirely new, not just revising the existing one.
Right.
It's far more extreme than most of their supporters realize or even endorse.
How extreme?
Well, the draft is described as extremely revivalist. It enshrines the emperor as a mythical figure, unapologetically references pre-war kokutai, or national polity ideology, respects the imperial rescript on education,
Right.
and critically, it lacks human rights provisions and war renunciation. It embodies an ultra-conservative, ultra-right stance. It's really quite something.
So, wait, a newspaper survey actually revealed that the majority of Sanseito's casual supporters were unaware of this controversial draft constitution. Or if they knew, they didn't specifically support it. That's a huge detail.
It is huge. It suggests their attraction lies more in those economic and environmental policies we just discussed, the more immediate, tangible things.
Like the tax cuts or the focus on organic farming.
Exactly. The deeper, more traditional right-wing supporters, maybe those aligning with Nippon Kaigi, they are drawn to these cultural tenets. But for the broader base, it seems to be the more immediate promises that resonate, like their proposal for a 100,000 JPY monthly child allowance, funded by government bonds.
100,000 yen a month per child. That's substantial.
Very. And scholarships that prioritize Japanese students, things that feel like direct benefits.
That's quite a revelation that the most extreme aspects of their platform aren't necessarily what draw in most of their support. So how do they manage to appeal to such a broad base, despite these deeply traditional or even radical core ideas bubbling underneath?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, isn't it? And it's where their strategy becomes very clever. Sanseito seems to employ this three-stage logic, not just for their overall platform, but within each policy pillar itself.
Three-stage logic. Okay, break that
There's
down.
one, introduction and empathy. They start by appealing directly to people's anxieties and dissatisfaction. Tax burdens, food safety worries, frustrations with the education system.
Tapping into real concerns.
Exactly. Stage 2, pleasant, concrete measures. Then they offer appealing, tangible solutions. Boosting industries with AI, those go-to-travel subsidies we mentioned, the 100,000 JPY child allowance, things that sound good, broadly appealing.
The easy wins, sort of.
Pretty much. And then Stage 3, core tenets. Only after drawing people in with the first two stages do they reveal their more specific or core ideological positions.
Like the xenophobia.
Like the opposition to foreign worker acceptance, yeah. Or anti-globalism, the anti-WHO, anti-pandemic treaty stuff. And eventually, the constitutional revision.
I see, so it's layered.
Very layered. And this structure is mirrored across their three main pillars. The economic policies are the broadest entry point, then the environmental, and finally the cultural, which holds their most core and traditionally right-wing elements. Most casual supporters probably engage mainly with stages 1 and 2.
And they might never really dig into stage 3, especially the constitutional stuff.
Exactly. They might not delve into the foundational constitutional proposals at all.
That explains how they draw in such a diverse range of people. It sounds almost maybe too neat. Are there any weaknesses in this three-stage logic that the source points out? Or maybe more to the point, who exactly is this middle class that they're trying to protect?
That's a great point about the strategy. The sources don't explicitly detail weaknesses in the logic itself, but they definitely reveal how it's applied to a very specific and often overlooked segment of society.
Okay.
When Sanseito says Japanese people, or the current generation, they're broadly referring to what we might call the lower middle income segment.
Lower middle.
Yeah. Our source identifies them as people like freelancers, the self-employed, workers in small and medium-sized businesses, non-regular employees, housewives.
Groups that maybe don't have strong union representation or feel ignored by established parties.
Precisely. Groups who often feel marginalized, lack representation from traditional labor unions or the big political parties.
So they're targeting those who feel left behind by the traditional political structures.
Exactly. And look at the data, it backs this up. The average household income in Japan for 2024 is around 5.3 million JPY, right? But the median income is significantly lower, 4.1 million JPY.
Wow, that's a big gap between average and median.
It is. It means more than half of households earn less than the average. And what's maybe even more striking is that the median income for the crucial 45-54 age group, it's actually dropped by 2 million JPY over the last 25 years.
Dropped by 2 million, that's huge.
It's a massive drop. So this middle segment isn't necessarily living in poverty, but they are experiencing significant economic pressure, real stagnation or decline.
Right, feeling squeezed.
Definitely squeezed. The source highlights that while overall income inequality, the Gini coefficient, hasn't drastically worsened after redistribution, after taxes and social insurance.
Okay.
The burden of this redistribution seems to have shifted. Wealthy individuals and corporations maybe face fewer taxes than before, relatively speaking, which means the middle feels like they're increasingly shouldering the cost of social welfare for the poor and the elderly.
So they feel like they're paying more than their fair share.
Yeah, they feel bullied and exploited. That's the language used. And this leads them to demand tax cuts rather than wage increases. We saw this in recent Ministry of Finance protests, which, interestingly, often involved self-employed people and housewives people without union ties, organizing as taxpayers instead.
That makes sense. They feel the tax burden directly.
Exactly. And Sanseito taps right into this sentiment. They criticize global financial capitalism. They position actual workers, the producers, against the investor class.
Which sounds almost like left-wing rhetoric, like Occupy Wall Street.
It does have echoes of that, yeah. Anti-neoliberal sentiment. But their underlying vision is quite different. It's a return to a kind of Showa-era model, the 1960s high-growth period.
A nostalgia.
A lot of nostalgia, yeah. A manufacturing-centric society, stable middle class, traditional gender roles. Critics might call it pre-war revival, but it seems more accurately a nostalgia for Japan's post-war economic boom. And notably, Sanseito's manifesto, it doesn't mention wage increases at all.
No mention of wage increases. That's telling. So it's a big government, aggressive fiscal policy, middle-class focused approach that doesn't prioritize wage increases. How does this compare to other parties in Japan, like Ishin or DPFP?
It's a really unique combination. Parties like Ishin, the Japan Innovation Party, and the Democratic Party for the People, DPFP, they also use terms like current generation. But their policies are different.
How so?
Well, Ishin generally advocates for austerity and a smaller government to help the current generation. Logically consistent, maybe, but it hasn't gained wide popularity, likely because it involves adjusting Social Security in ways that would hurt seniors.
Right, politically difficult.
Very. DPFP, on the other hand, also supports aggressive fiscal policy, like Sanseito, but they lean towards a smaller government that empowers individual economic activity. They focus on wage increases, investment, appealing more, perhaps, to the upper middle class. Sanseito, however, stands out. They combine that middle-class focus with aggressive fiscal policy and a vision for a larger government. They promise direct benefits like the child allowance without necessarily relying on wage increases or investment, which probably wouldn't resonate as much with their lower middle base anyway.
So they carve out a specific niche.
Really do. They effectively fill a gap in the political landscape that other parties weren't addressing in the same way.
This raises a crucial and maybe darker question about who is included in their vision of Japanese people or the middle. If they're trying to protect a specific group, what does that imply for those outside it?
Exactly. This is where we see Sanseito's strategy of what the source calls cutting off the edges.
Cutting off the edges.
Yeah. To define and protect the middle, they seem to explicitly target and sometimes demonize various outgroups.
Such as?
Well, their rhetoric is often full of what can be categorized as racism against foreigners, sexism against LGBTQ plus individuals, ageism against the elderly.
Ageism. Yep.
Proposing things like self-funded end-of-life care, for example. And even ableism against people with disabilities. There have been claims like developmental disabilities don't exist.
Well, that's quite extreme.
It is. And the analysis suggests this isn't necessarily out of pure malice, though the impact is harmful regardless. It's presented as a deliberate presentation, a way to signal to their middle supporters, we will protect you, even if it's at the expense of these others.
Right. Defining the U.S. by creating a them.
Yes.
So it's about shifting the blame from abstract economic forces or policies onto visible, tangible others. Can you elaborate on the foreigner issue? That's often a central point in these kinds of discussions.
Absolutely. And Japan's foreigner problem, or the perception of it, is quite distinct from, say, Europe's.
How so?
In Europe, the concern is often welfare xenophobia, right? Large immigrant populations perceived as a drain on high welfare states.
Yeah, that narrative exists.
But Japan has a relatively small foreign population, only around 3%, compared to maybe 30% in Germany. And Japan actually has a labor shortage. So job displacement isn't really the primary driver of anti-foreigner sentiment here.
Okay, so if it's not welfare or jobs, what is it?
It seems to be more about investor xenophobia.
Investor xenophobia.
Yeah, resentment primarily towards strong foreigners, particularly wealthy Chinese investors buying up Japanese land, things like high-rise apartments in cities, or land in areas with natural resources, like near water sources or forests.
Why is that happening?
Well, the depreciating yen makes Japanese assets cheaper, and Japan has relatively few regulations on foreign land purchases compared to other countries.
I see.
Now, the data suggests that this isn't actually happening on a massive, widespread scale, but the lack of transparent information creates deep anxiety, a feeling that Japan is being bought up. It's fundamentally an economic security issue, or perceived as such.
And what's concerning is how that resentment might then transfer, isn't it, onto other groups of foreigners.
Precisely. That's the real danger here. How this resentment against strong foreign investors often gets transferred or conflated with attitudes towards weak foreigners, like workers, students, tourists.
How does that play out?
Well, when Japanese people, maybe struggling themselves, see tourists seemingly enjoying expensive meals or hear about foreign students receiving scholarships, it can fuel the sense of unfairness. Why them and not us?
Right.
And this conflates a complex economic security issue, the land purchasing, with separate concerns about crime or public safety. It feeds into the narrative that foreigners are committing crimes and public safety is deteriorating, even if statistics don't necessarily bear that out universally. It becomes an easy scapegoat.
Shifting blame again. Okay, now, you mentioned their unique environmental policy earlier, the soil over sky approach.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on how this, too, might be a form of cutting off the edges?
Absolutely. Because while they're often seen or present themselves as an environmental party, they defy the conventional climate agenda entirely.
Right, you said they dispute global warming.
They do. They directly dispute it and the need for decarbonization policies. Their focus isn't global climate change, it's local, national issues. Organic farming, food self-sufficiency, literally looking at the soil under their feet rather than the sky above.
And this idea, Nohonshugi, agrarianism.
Yeah.
You said it has historical links.
It does, and some of those links are quite dangerous. If you look historically, you can see parallels, perhaps uncomfortable ones, in ideologies like Nazi Germany's Blut und Boden, blood and soil,
Blood and soil.
which justified eugenics, the expulsion of undesirables like Jews, framed as weeds, spoiling the national soil.
Okay, that's a chilling parallel.
It is. And in pre-war Japan, agrarian fascism led to groups like Kitsumeiden, a pre-war terrorist group, actually, which engaged in political violence and promoted Pan-Asianism under an agrarian banner.
So it has a history tied to violence and ultranationalism.
It can. Even more recently, in the 1980s, some right-wing ecologists in Japan, reportedly influenced by neo-Nazism in Germany, shifted towards anti-foreigner movements. And those movements eventually spawned hate speech groups like Zaitokukai, a notorious group known for anti-Korean hate speech.
So the connection isn't just historical, it can manifest in modern extremism too.
It shows how this Nohonshugi concept, this focus on the purity of the land and its people, can be twisted into exclusionary, even violent movements. It's a form of nationalism deeply intertwined with naturalism. It's an environmental policy, completely different from the global interconnected vision of something like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs.
We've explored the policies, the shrewd political strategy, the historical echoes. But what if Sanseito's appeal goes even deeper, maybe touching on fundamental human needs, beliefs that kind of transcend traditional politics? What more should we understand about this movement?
That's a really insightful question. And there is one more, maybe surprising, angle to consider. Beyond being just a political or social phenomenon, the movement around Sanseito might also be seen as, well, a religious phenomenon.
Religious? How do you mean, like connected to established religion?
Not necessarily established ones, more that we're observing a shift. Older, established new religious movements, think of Komeito, the political party backed by Soka Gakkai, which traditionally supported the struggling. Maybe they aren't fully meeting people's needs in the same way anymore.
Okay, so a gap is opening up.
Exactly. And this creates space for newer movements, often with spiritual or New Age-inspired elements. Think about the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
A lot of conspiracy theories, especially around vaccines, became deeply intertwined with spiritual and New Age thinking, didn't they?
They definitely did, yeah. Online especially.
We see this powerful three-set emerging: national, natural, and spiritual.
National, natural, spirit.
Yeah. This fusion creates a unique mechanism for support that goes beyond just traditional political or economic rationales. It taps into a deeper sense of community, belief. It offers a kind of holistic framework for understanding and addressing life's anxieties that conventional politics often misses.
So it becomes less about specific policies.
And maybe more about belonging to a community that offers a complete worldview, a sense of meaning, maybe even spiritual comfort alongside the political answers.
This deep dive has truly given us such a multi-layered understanding of Sanseito. It's way more complex than the headlines suggest. We've seen how they combine this ultra-aggressive fiscal policy rooted in a really surprising interpretation of modern monetary theory,
Yeah, the MMT angle is key.
with an agrarian environmentalism focused on soil over sky and a revivalist cultural policy championing traditional Japanese values, even if many supporters aren't fully aware of the most extreme parts, like the draft constitution.
Exactly. And we've also explored their sophisticated three-stage logic of appeal. How that allows them to draw in a broad lower middle segment, people feeling economically squeezed, maybe abandoned by established parties,
Right.
and how to protect this middle, they've sometimes resorted to rhetoric that cuts off the edges, leading to discrimination against various minority groups. And how they conflate complex issues like foreign investment with more local, tangible concerns about safety or fairness. And finally, recognizing the movement's potential as a kind of religious phenomenon driven by that blend of the national, natural, and spiritual, offers another unique lens to understand why they resonate so deeply with some people.
It's clear that while the headlines often focus on the more extreme elements, the party's success seems to lie in its ability to tap into these deeper anxieties, these feelings of being left behind, and then offer seemingly straightforward solutions that promise to protect ordinary Japanese people.
It's a potent mix.
A really potent mix, yeah. And it has significantly shifted the political conversation in Japan. So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, maybe consider this. In a world that feels increasingly complex, awash with information and anxieties, how might movements like Sanseito, with their blend of economic promises, cultural nostalgia, and even spiritual undertones, be fulfilling needs that traditional political parties are simply failing to address?